Pascal Ngwech is an Acholi woman from Pade district in northern Uganda. Like many others, she fled the war in the north to Uganda's capital. She now walks into the city each morning to sell bananas to support her family. Pascal is part of the legacy of a 20-year insurgency in northern Uganda that displaced nearly 2 million people. A war characterized by abduction and extreme brutality against a civilian population. And for many northerners that have fled the violence to Uganda's cities and towns, they are a reminder of a war many of their fellow Ugandans knew only through newspapers and broadcast.
Madung lo kwang tin ne odan ma te ka dan ene do chok wa rion ke do mo oi kam karon oi kam la kwang be fulier de dai kam be dum pe bede mu kan ron wat tinu mu kan ron bi nu mu ta o gulu.
When the war intensified, Pascal and her family were forced from their village and resettled in a camp for internally displaced persons, IDPs. But they felt far from safe. Her husband had served in the National Army, and they knew he would be targeted by the rebels. He fled to the capital, Kampala.
Endo rayon bino, wanong opor mutaka, magi yoldan kelwa ka wanyo di town kaya. Medungi wanyo kanyo wanted ba town kanyo. Opurte barana ni anaria dek mok. Enong chwaro chako yino tij mo me o gine koro en gad eni. Chi gad ko nge chane pe. Chaka en pier bichele. Gicholo ya chaka no kere ona mungu. An machala ana daka no ni dong pe bedde wa chaka gi yer mora. Te baranda na kawa kenyo. Yer en dog ni dog kere gani teru. Anda ne ana we. Enong pe ka mado binu pe o mi pe don wati mo bere. Chaka gwa la gla bole taw. Pian no do dog pe ko. Pian pe bini yo ada. Ka yo ada no wan porom binu kan. Wan fu magi nyala we fu. Ma beru na fu pa ka waten. Acholi betem la kiti jeni. Makari tin en yo kiri diri kala we wano bi dogang. Ne chala kit gini ni bi chungo be di town Kampala kan. Pian man wan magi yerwa gi nyerwa ni en wati katemo gini pingo.
Ngwechi's story mirrors that of many IDPs that took refuge in urban centers around the country when fighting erupted between the government and the Lord's Resistance Army. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimated in 2006 that there could be hundreds of thousands of these urban-based IDPs, but a formal census has never been conducted.
so that we can discuss.
We few have relatives in Kampala. We decided to leave our towns, come to the town where we are now called urban internal displaced persons living temporarily in Kampala.
Maybe there's a way they can talk to the government. So that the government really should stop these people from mistreating our people. They came to me and they were telling me that they are really being mistreated, those ones who are selling banana in Kampala street. They said sometimes KCC comes and grab their bananas and they take it. People are telling them they are tired of Acholis in Kampala. Others harass them and say, what are you people doing here in Kampala? Why don't you go back to your country, to your districts?
Living with the relatives becomes very expensive. So everyone had to look for his own ways. And most of them, when you look at them, where they are dwelling is the Islamic area, where the houses are made out of mud. There's no floor in that house, it's just out of the mud. And that is part of the living now. The displaced in urban cities are facing.
The activities of the rebel Ugandan Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA, have come under the spotlight again with accusations of atrocities. Its leader, Joseph Kony, along with some of his fighters, are believed to be in the DR Congo, where they've been accused of abductions and killing of members of the local population, including 90 children last week. So what's the LRA's response to these allegations? David Nyakorach Matsanga is the LRA spokesman and leader of the peace delegation.
First of all, Peter, I would like to tell you that these accusations are baseless because none of the LRA troops are in those areas.
In 1996, the government began its counterinsurgency strategy of forcing the rural population of the north into congested internal displacement camps. It was an attempt to cut the LRA off from the populace. Encampment first began in the Acholi sub-region, where the fighting was more severe, and it was later employed in the Lango and Teso sub-regions as the war spread. Under encampment, there was no freedom of movement. The IDPs could not return to their land for cultivation. They were completely dependent on international relief agencies for food and other basic services. Confined living seemed to distort the social fabric. Drinking, domestic violence, and even suicide were now common. The army was deployed to guard the camps, but they often proved ineffective in repelling attacks by the LRA, who had since turned against the civilian population. The IDPs that were able fled to urban centers in Masindi, Mbale, Entebbe, Jinja, and Kampala. Most of Labora Santa's extended family were killed in the conflict. Her oldest son, Patrick, was abducted but managed to escape. She now works with her 3 small children in the quarry each day, where she can expect to earn a pittance. When she and her husband came to Kampala, they were directed to a community of displaced northerners living in a place called Acholi quarters near Kiweka. These IDPs lived on an old graveyard and worked in stone quarries.
Ente ka mo ka ngej ma wano da ma furwa tiano uno ko yore char botwa lu tiano kiot eni pe ko gina chama la tien pe ko gina roga kiot chamo kan ma chuni mere no da ko no yot ki dano weng piene ngo rio mo nyo pere ta ma marach kiot eni be no pe ente man ko mberi dong pelar piene luenye I family wa ama logone peti ngare mama de dong dan tu mo wenge ne ko ge weng dogola gi dogola an kana dong en to tikilu tini mo ma tiam tiam mano gu dong chalo ki chiwa julu gi olo gi tie
Over the years, Labok has made many attempts to start a small business for herself, but all of her attempts have failed. Like most of those living in Acholi quarters, she's now totally dependent on the quarry to feed her family. She must sell almost 10 jerrycans of crushed stone to buy 1 kilo of maize flour.
Ko chiar gang da no ko ne bebe dak loy kan ma dong mir na ben tie mi chiar gang miro dong pe mi beru kan
ko la bulu ya te tin ni ko la bulu chak chen pe pe ya chen
beru kan wa ma la che to ala olla bu na olla dong para mo beru kan pieni geno mi pe da ra beru kan wa kan do chiar ma la je dak lo tiang wa ti ka da phun ma bè ma dong lu tiang ra no ma bè bè pe phun mi te kwar ma mi yang lu tiang nan igwak ki kede wa ku dang nu nen ji ma be ji gang paka kan yang wa da me lu tiang da mo ma dong lu tiang be pe bi ngi gang ka wa ga kan ara mi ar ngo dwak tiang pa ji
In Pumude, on the outskirts of Jinja, IDP women eke out a living brewing grain alcohol, waragi. The profit gives many of them barely enough to eat 1 meal a day.
Abino kundari yung konyo. Kakaya na tayo kaya. Kanyo peka yo kaya lakit mi kwa. Ati kilo tiro. Mami rasuli school fiji. Siya ne pe. Dak kia chao me ne pe. La wara mo do mi atam mo chet kate du kwa.
Many urban IDPs make a living through subsistence livelihoods, similar to their rural counterparts. However, they have the added challenge of paying rent. And because many of them are squatting on other people's land, they are perpetually in danger of eviction.
Kwa makan kita tiga tera kade. Kako tie, watia ti chalo pi. Wawan nong kwa mayot. Kwa pe tiga tera wa mabe. Kakama wan wa beri ye. Dujugi yar wan wa daga gang wan.
Throughout the war, urban IDPs have received little to no attention from the government and humanitarian agencies. Yet the government's own policy on IDPs, based upon the guiding principles on internal displacement, states that all IDPs, regardless of where they chose to resettle in the country, must be provided with the means to return voluntarily to their homes in safety and with dignity. Northern Uganda has been peaceful since a ceasefire agreement was signed in 2006. However, in April 2008, LRA leader Joseph Kony failed to sign a peace agreement with the government of Uganda. There is worry that the negotiations, which began 2 years ago in the South Sudan capital, Juba, could unravel.
Any good news?
Sikiliza Brigadier, ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that I have postponed the signing ceremony for over 4 times because I know the consequences of this process collapsing. They are very hard for Kony and they are very hard for the region.
Despite this, government and humanitarian actors have begun speaking in the language of return and recovery. In Acholi, IDPs are moving to smaller, so-called transit sites closer to their home villages. Some are clearing their land and rebuilding their homes, which have been abandoned for many years.
Mr. Chairman, the council you lead in Gulu, so that after being in peace for 2 years, people should make their minds quickly and go home, because they have been highly impoverished by the displacement. They have been in a squalid environment for too long, since 1996.
Many urban-based IDPs have now begun to organize and count themselves and strategize about how to return home. In Kireka, one organization provides health services to IDPs infected with HIV.
And today's health education, the theme was on cholera prevention, how to keep our environment from attack of cholera. Because 2 weeks ago we had a cholera breakdown in this village, but it was in the lower part of the zone.
They also train them to make paper beads to generate income.
Most of IDPs remain like in a blind spot. They were not known, they were not being recognized by the government. Not until we started the program last year. They were there as IDPs and nobody was caring about them. So we discussed the problems being faced by the IDPs. What are the ways forward? How are we going to return back home? What is necessary to return back home? Since we ran away 20 years ago, there is even no home. We have now left with bushes.
The creation of urban IDPs as a category is legally wrong. Creation of such a distinction is a little bit fallacious, because it ultimately leads agencies and organizations responsible for the protection of IDPs to make or to assume that people who have been displaced to urban areas do not have the same displaced needs as people who are displaced to camps in rural locations.
In February 2008, Honorable Musa Ichwero, the Minister of State for Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees, officially acknowledged the existence of urban IDPs by visiting Acholi quarters in Kireka.
I think the first thing I'll do is to promise you that I'll go and speak for you.
Even when I went to Kireka and I looked at them, certainly the situation, their condition is very pathetic. Women and children are crushing stones in order to survive. I thought it is sad. My office mobilized a bit of food once and sent, although it was not enough, at least we just wanted to associate with them.
Although government as a general program, I think there is need now for me to specifically factor you in the return and resettlement program.
The dilemma we have is urban IDPs are difficult to define because they have since fused with the rural, the urban poor. We don't want to start anything here really that can say like create a pull factor, because if we do that here, say like in Kireka, that I go and design an intervention that can better their lives there, chances are that even the urban poor will now masquerade as IDPs, and it becomes a pull factor that can even pull the rural people back here to the urban area with the hope that maybe the opportunities here. So in the event that it becomes very difficult, we may have to design programs in future that may just benefit all the urban poor, and hopefully it will also capture.
Urban-based IDPs are often confused with economic migrants. those that migrate from the rural areas to the cities and towns in hopes of finding employment. This has allowed the numerous relief agencies that assist IDPs in northern Uganda to view them as a low priority.
I think the difficulty and the reluctance of the international community to address urban IDPs is that it's really hard to define them. Humanitarian interventions in general are drawn to the worst off, right? So there is a perception that urban IDPs are better off. If they were able to make it to the city, then they're okay. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that's kind of the blanket strategy.
IDPs who have been displaced to urban areas have remained for humanitarian agencies. They've remained what you could consider a phenomenon that the eye refuses to see, in the sense that the moment they seem to be mixed up with another population, it becomes easy for agencies as well as government to renege on its duty to assist. What appears to be the problem here is that humanitarian agencies in general tend to take on issues which are institutionally more easy to manage.
Otim Justin left most of his family behind in Pade when he decided to flee. He was a local government official and he feared he would be killed if captured by the LRA. He traveled by bicycle as far as Lira, where and then a relative helped him with bus fare to Kampala. He works as a laborer in an economy where a full day of hard work will earn you less than $1. He has been saving to move his wife and their children back to the village.
Anka we kanya worgang acher kapuro ano kirkwa mabe cham no ti maramo lo teno girawo chamone ke kwan mogo bene tikunu UPE malo ten ro kwan be no la bong cholo chente me kwan tiro ano ke kanye ni lo tena ti bere na abo no kwan chini ana duju dong ti bere kan.
What we know from the IDPs that we've been working with is that some of them, particularly those who you might consider as not being necessarily vulnerable, have been making a lot of trips to northern Uganda to assess for themselves. But there are also those uniquely vulnerable categories of urban IDPs who cannot afford to make those go and see visits, who cannot afford to go and assess for themselves whether their home areas are ready and ready to receive them. So for those categories of people, they might perpetually remain in displacement.
Oting visited his home 3 months ago for the first time since he left northern Uganda.
Karmana cherogang achera tora dano go berke yom chwin madame nana kana dugu chen da bere mirege no tieni dong pa dugi ero kire me kwana kuna yo berite yana pege gino mo kuno machalo gi achama people no marmada.
Recently, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees began planning to execute a needs assessment on urban IDPs in partnership with the government.
We've also indicated as UNHCR that we definitely need to pay more attention in the near future to those communities. Mainly also because now there is still, you know, by and large, good interest in IDP issues, but that might fade away. And if we do not look at these populations now, when suddenly the time, or we do it late, then we may no longer have the necessary donor support. And now for those who would go back spontaneously, they would anyway benefit from because there is, in the IDP program, we don't give necessarily individual type of assistance, but rather support communities, and they would certainly be welcome to join that, I mean to receive support through those mechanisms.
But this is what worries many urban IDPs. Many feel they would not be able to avail themselves to food rations and other services, like camp-based IDPs. The prospect of returning and rebuilding a life is therefore daunting.
We really need from the government is to give us a letter for recognition so that when we join our rural IDPs, we shall be considered as one, because all of us are being called the displaced people. Those in the rural area has been registered, known. In any case, any donor comes to them, and we come from Kampala, we go back home, we don't have any recognition letter from the government, we shall not be served.
Because most of the children who are here, they don't know, because others was born from here. You see, when they are born from here, they don't know, they have never seen the culture even alone. So we are trying to bring that so that people understand.
The displacement of the world has changed, like Acholi sub-region in different ways. Because like when you look at our culture, has been completely lost to some extent, like the new generation, like those who have been in IDPs in urban areas. We're not doing the position to understand it well. Look at the future of the children. Those who are not schooling will remain like that. That means instead of coping up with the level and the wave of civilization as it started long time, we are going to develop backwardly. Because the world of today, no education, no future. That means the future of the youth, the future of the children of the Acholi who are displaced here are not going to be seen.
This is Otim Justin's second trip to Pade in the last 3 months. His father's land lies just a few kilometers from the Geregere decongestion camp, where the rest of his family resides. The last time he was here, he received a warm welcome from his family, who put him through the Acholi tradition of Nyonotongwen, a ritual of welcoming and cleansing for a person that has been away for a long time.
Ke anong gia chama mo, maka gina raw konyo ane mi chama, mada ano ne raw konyo wajo chane ti dagamo ge bin kwetgi.
Mi odonyi twak tin ni bang we ka gwakanyo. Tiene mi lo ko yang we.
Tien ka pudi ber kam kike. Chuna put pe ya ye mabe. An ngene put kit kai neno put kiradano ber kam mamane no ko ne put pogi.
This is Otim's father's land. He built his home here when he was a young man. After being abandoned for many years, his home is now ruined and his land is overgrown. When he was here last, he planted sorghum, but the crop failed. He has determined that he must rebuild his home.
I mean, by their very nature, a lot of the urban IDPs
This is my son house.
Are people who have experienced extreme conditions of violation. Remember, populations of that nature, if they don't see any sort of response to their situation might become a risk population, might become a population from which it would be easy to start up an insurgency or that kind of thing. So these things might come to haunt us at some point in the future if we don't deal with them.
This is my real home.
Asking what comes to mind when he sees his house like this.
What he said?
He said he's very annoyed.
Ma dog, when I'm